All right, so I am super excited to be sitting here with Veronica Ewers. How do you say your last name? Because I always just say Ewers, but I don't know if that's correct or not.
That's correct.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, most people say Ewers or Ewers. Yeah, so Ewers is correct. It's like a baby sheep, a U.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to have you as our first guest on the Wheel Talk podcast. It's really exciting.
Awesome. I'm excited to be here.
I wanted to kind of get like the mundane question out of the way that is also quite necessary, I think, in your case, because you are brand new to the sport. How did you find cycling?
Oh, man. It was a very interesting way into cycling. I mean, I've been riding a bike since I was a kid, but, just riding to and from school. I grew up in a small town called Moscow, Idaho. So once I was in elementary school, I was already just riding to and from school. But I played soccer or football pretty much my entire childhood through college. And then, after my collegiate career within soccer ended, I had that sort of athlete crisis that I think a lot of people deal with of what am I doing now? Because so much of my identity was around being a student athlete. And then once that was over, I kind of had to figure out how to fill that void. So I ended up running a ton and doing a lot of Olympic lifting and not really having any goals, but I was just doing it to fill that void. And after I graduated from Willamette University, which is in Salem, Oregon, I moved to Seattle, Washington, and ended up joining a local running community, through which I met someone who was interested in duathlons. And I, excuse me, at the time was working for Seattle Children's Hospital and was riding my old hand-me-down Kona Jake the Snake to and from work, which was maybe 3 miles one way, pretty flat, and just like did not take care of the bike at all. But this friend asked if I would join her to a local Meet the Team ride. Not really knowing what I was getting into, I said yes, just to support her, because she was nervous to go by herself. And of course, I showed up and I was on my Kona and with flat pedals and tennis shoes and wearing leggings and a sweatshirt, and then everyone else is fully kitted out on really nice bikes.
Do you have any pictures from that first ride? Because I feel like that would just be a gem.
I don't know if I have any photos of that specifically, but I recently posted, I think, a side-by-side on Instagram of just like where I was in 2018, I think. And I'm wearing like the helmet with the visor and with that Kona and like leggings and a like just regular workout top, long sleeve. And at least it was high vis. But yeah, I don't think I have any photos, unfortunately. But yeah, so I ended up just saying, well, I'm here. I'm not going to back out, see how this goes. And at that Meet the Team ride, I ended up meeting Jennifer Wheeler and David Richter, who I guess saw something in me in that Meet the Team ride. It was a very relatively chill ride. But they were pretty surprised that I was still able to hang on with what I showed up wearing and using. But so they ended up creating their own team, which became Fount Cycling Guild. And Jennifer reached out to me pretty persistently after that Meet the Team ride, saying that they were going to start this new team and that she wanted to develop a strong women's team and wanted me to be a part of it. And so at that time I was still I was still running a lot and part of that running community, but didn't really feel like I was necessarily part of a team, which I think or didn't really feel like I had much of a community still. Seattle's pretty cold in the way people are at times. So it's really hard to find that network of people. But anyways, I said, sure, why not? I'll join this team. Not really thinking much of it. I just thought it as an opportunity to maybe find that community. And that I think I officially joined in late 2018. But I was still focusing on running and not really doing much on the bike. And then with that team, my first race was in February of 2019. At that point, I had a decent bike, which was good. Probably this third time I'd clipped into a bike was that race. But yeah, from there, I just fell in love with cycling and competing, and now I'm racing in the world tour, which is pretty wild. I never ever would have thought I would have been here. I honestly used to hate riding a bike as a kid. Mostly I will blame my parents on this one because they would always want to go on bike rides on Mother's or Father's Day. And they had they had road bikes and I was on a mountain bike. And of course I was going to be miserable trying to follow them on a mountain bike while they're on road bikes when we're riding on the road. So I'm going to blame them for that one. But I ended up full circle coming back to it and falling in love with it.
Awesome. And did you find your community?
Yeah. Yeah. I met a lot of really, really incredible people in Seattle. And, I was still working a 40-hour work week at Seattle Children's Hospital, and I fell 110% into cycling, but I was able to fulfill that social need through that community in cycling. So that was really amazing. And I still keep in touch with a lot of people from that team. And someone from that team actually ended up moving to Girona. She's not a professional cyclist, but she obviously still rides a lot. And so now that I've moved to Girona, I am just really happy to have a piece of home here as well.
Have you talked at all to Taylor Wiles? Because she also was a soccer player in college, and
I didn't know that.
yeah, she found the bike like through soccer, football as well.
That's amazing. I had no idea.
Yeah, I actually know I know of one other soccer to cycling player. That's Carrie Higgins. I think she was before your time. But she used to be quite the impressive track rider, and she was on United Healthcare with me for a couple years.
Nice.
She taught me how to race a crit, but she also went to cycling through soccer. So it's not like a completely unconventional jump.
Yeah. I was never known to be one of the more aggressive soccer players on the field. I played outside mid primarily, so I got to just run a lot. But I mean, I could totally see a center midfielder being just like a sprinter with that mentality, or just being really beastly in crits for sure.
Yeah.
Just because you have to have that really smart and aggressive mentality.
I don't know what position Taylor played, but you guys should chat.
Yeah. Yeah. And she's like a diesel out there. She can push hard. So I must be some sort of endurance position because, man.
So you didn't really have a ton of knowledge about like professional women's cycling before you kind of fell into it?
Not at all. I even men's cycling too. I really like maybe saw bits and pieces of the Tour de France back in the day, but I really had no idea. And especially joining a women's team, I was like, wait, this is a sport? I know there's like cycling, but yeah, it was completely new to me. And Yeah, which is really unfortunate. I think there's a lot of talent, untapped talent in the States, but because it's not a very popular sport, especially compared to the likes of most of Europe, really. Yeah, it would be interesting if more people got involved in it.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that because I guess you kind of hit the US racing scene pre-pandemic, which was still there was still a bit of a scene. Like we still had the Tour of California in 2019. There was a bunch of races if you wanted to kind of dive into that. But then 2020 happened and obviously the pandemic happened and races were postponed and now we're looking at kind of the state of racing in the US is pretty sad.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I don't think I'll be going back to the States at all this year to race. And I've heard great things about the Tour of California and even Redlands, which is still happening. But um, yeah, my first pro nationals was in 2021. So yeah, I mean, so many of the races in the US are now no longer existing. So
And you only did,
yeah.
I think, from looking at your results on First Cycling, you only actually did two races in the States, or two or three pro races in the States before you made the jump over to Europe, which is pretty nuts. Like that is
Yeah.
massive. That's a massive
Jumping from,
shift.
oh man. Yeah, I think I did pro nationals and Joe Martin. And then I went to Ardèche. And that was like a whew,
And then you
that
did the
was a
first ever women's Paris-Roubaix, which was an
yeah.
experience, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. I was so nervous, man. I like to say I participated in in Paris-Roubaix. I did not really race it, but it was an absolutely incredible experience, and yeah, it was very cool to be a part of that.
How have you found the learning like the tactics and riding in the peloton and everything if you didn't have a ton of experience before?
It's it's pretty tough. Um, I yeah, I find myself getting overwhelmed or giving into some fear sometimes, which makes me hesitate, and then I find myself at the back of the bunch, and it comes as second nature to a lot of the women in the peloton because they have been riding and racing for so long. So it's a lot of, I think for me, it's been much more of a mental challenge than a physical challenge navigating in the bunch, because I think ultimately I know where I need to be and what I need to do, but it's the nerves of filling a gap in the bunch when we're going however fast. And yeah, but it's been really awesome this year seeing where our team is going. It's still a pretty similar team to last year, but having the likes of Allison Jackson and Georgia Williams coming onto the team, it's making our team a lot stronger in being able to support myself and other newer women on the team, newer as in maybe less experienced, helping us be more cohesive in working together in the bunch. So that has been really helpful this year. But it's just a lot of racing as much as I can, getting as much experience as I can. And fortunately, from the team and the directors specifically, having races that are primarily for me to just gain experience and have no pressure, that has been really, really helpful. But yeah, it's such a learning experience, and especially coming in relatively late, I guess. It's not normal to, feel like you're going as fast as you are and be as close to other people. So it's very interesting experience to continue trying to develop on.
But it's something that, I mean, it seems like comes pretty natural to you. You can't be like completely incapable of riding in a bunch and end up ninth at the first ever Tour de France Femme avec Zwift.
Yeah, I think, I mean, yeah, that's true. I think a lot of early last season helped me learn a lot going into it and understand the necessity of being toward the front to avoid crashes and just learning from mistakes. It's funny, somebody told me recently that, oh, my friend Morgan here in Girona told me that someone was asking her about me and my descending skills, which is, I think, hilarious because I used to be absolute shit at descending and everything. And I think they were asking her how I got so good at descending. And honestly, it's from getting dropped on the descent in races after working so hard on the climbs. That's just so demoralizing. And I think just experiencing that and not wanting that to happen again made me push my comfort zone to get into being able to descend a lot better and be less fearful, because I don't want to continue working so hard and then having that demoralizing feeling. So I think the beginning of the year, similarly with, I guess, working in the bunch, I've put myself in really bad and not helpful situations by sitting at the back and being caught in a crash and then working really hard to get up, or being at the back before a key moment and burning so much energy that I'm useless once I use that energy. So it's really motivating to learn from your mistakes, I think. But I still have a long way to go.
So once you kind of were introduced to cycling and you joined that team back in 2018, 2019, did you start to watch the women's races and kind of be like, okay, I want to get to that point? Or did you just follow a trajectory of kind of getting better and better and better and climbing the ladder, and then you found yourself on TIBCO?
I did start watching more women's racing, not a lot, just because I didn't have GCN and I didn't have much access. I guess in the States is a bit more difficult. Now I've learned the amazingness of VPNs. But yeah, I think actually Strada was the first race that I watched, and I was just in awe of how badass the women were in that race and just how brutal the race looked. But even viewing it, I was like, there's like, they were still just this next level that I never saw myself getting to. And it was just more motivating to see really strong women out there. And so I think that made me motivated to do my workouts and race, but not really with the goal of becoming a professional cyclist. Like, I don't think that was just so unheard of in my mind to become a professional athlete. So yeah, I think I just kept training and racing because I loved doing that. And it's where I found joy. And so then I just kept competing and doing pretty well. But, you always have those doubts in your head of, well, it's just local racing. And, when the peloton is 20 women versus 170, it's quite different. But I do think that the women's peloton in the States is getting stronger and stronger, just as the women's peloton in Europe is getting significantly stronger. So that's really, really cool to see.
Yeah. I really hope that in the future, the US racing scene kind of is reignited. I'm hoping that, similar to men's racing in the States, you have the Tour de France really spurred a huge cycling boom in the States. And now we have the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift. And I'm hoping that means that just by having that name and kind of having that backing, that there's at some point down the line a boom in the States with racing as well. And I think like having some incredible American riders like yourself, and I mean Leah Thomas, hopefully she can come back, you know, from her back injury and everything, and like having people like you guys to look up to racing in the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift, it's just really, really inspiring for the future of racing in the US. I've got like all my fingers crossed because it's such a, I was part of kind of like this weird semi boom lull. Like before my time racing, there was a boom in the States where there was a lot more racing. There was like the race in Idaho that was a huge deal, and stuff like that. And the Colorado Classic was bigger, the Pro Cycling Challenge and stuff like that. But yeah, it's been such a bummer to watch the racing scene just kind of evaporate. And I think because Americans are so obsessed with the Tour de France, the fact that we actually have a women's race, that it's live, that there's, you know, storylines to follow, that the racing is just amazing to watch. Like I didn't want the Tour de France to be my favorite race of 2022 because I wanted to be like, no, I'm a seasoned professional. I'm a seasoned fan. Like I know all these other races that you've never heard of and they were better, but like it was so good. And I'm just hoping that kind of carries itself into the US and kind of spurs maybe like 5 years down the road, we'll see, you know, a lot more excitement about racing. And I don't know, there's always rumblings about the Tour of California coming back, and I never believe them because I don't want to get my heart broken like that.
Yeah, I mean, I from my small hometown, there were so many people that were reaching out to me. I mean, because I come from a small town, they were, I mean, interested in, of course, I am in the local newspaper, which, you know, it's just something interesting happening in the hometown, but it brought so many people just in my hometown to cycling in general. So many people hadn't even been interested in the men's Tour de France before. And now that there's a women's Tour de France and somebody that they can relate to being at this worldly stage in athletics, I think it just brought more people into the sport that way. So I really hope, like you're saying, more Americans that get involved in it can sort of make it a more popular sport. And I do think that, I mean, accessibility is a huge issue. It's not a cheap sport to be involved in. And it also, I mean, in my hometown, there was no such thing as a school cycling team. So I think if we were to get more community and sort of extracurricular involvement in cycling, then that would build interest in cycling in general, especially in younger generations, to make it a cool sport for people to race in and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, there are a lot of, I think accessibility is a huge part of it, and knowledge around cycling, because, you know, just maintaining a bike is a bit more difficult than grabbing cleats and shin guards and running out the door.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How was, I also want to know about that, because you said last year you were part of the audio diaries for a former podcast that shall remain unnamed. And you said that you had a bunch of people like reaching out to you, and your parents were at the Tour de France, which was really cool. So has it been like, have you seen, before you would have thought, okay, like cycling is this niche sport, but once you're kind of part of it, you kind of start to see it everywhere. And you realize like, oh, actually all these kids that I grew up with are like now getting into cycling, like even apart from watching me race. Did you find that at all?
Yeah, a bit. And I think just more and more people are reaching out to me about it and are really interested. I've had a couple people reaching out to me and say, hey, I'm really serious about wanting to be more competitive in this sport. How how did you get there, and what do you recommend I do to get there, and what sort of things do I need to do, and that sort of thing. So yeah, I totally see it happening. And it's interesting because I got involved in cycling just before COVID. And I mean, a silver lining of COVID is that so many people got into riding a bike, just to do something during the pandemic and during quarantine. So I think that, on top of the Tour de France Femme, really created that cycling boom for so many people, because they were already riding bikes and then saw this huge event happening that was honestly quite historic, and more people wanted to be involved in that. So yeah, I see more and more people getting involved in it, which is really awesome.
All right, so I want to backtrack a little bit. So you talked a little bit at the beginning about community, and kind of finding a community was part of what brought you to cycling. And now, ironically, or I guess as it goes, you're living in Girona, which is like one of the biggest cycling communities in Europe, at least one of the biggest English speaking cycling communities in Europe. So how are you finding it?
I am really loving it. I mostly just love having a place to come home to after races. Last year, I was living at a friend of a friend's mom's house in Belgium for the first half, and then that friend's friend of a friend's house, the second half. And I'm so grateful for those individuals for letting me stay in their homes. It really made my life a lot easier, transitioning over here. That said, it still never it's hard for me to be in someone else's space and not feel like I'm in someone else's space, even though they say, make yourself at home. So I was really craving and missing having, my own kitchen, my own mattress, my own pillows, just having a space that I can leave messy and not feel bad, or can maintain the standards of cleanliness that I prefer. So that has been the biggest positive out of moving here. That said, too, I had hesitated to move to Girona because I knew there were so many people here. And I'm a person that enjoys their alone time, and not always wanting to bump into somebody I know everywhere I go. And that's what I expected when I moved here. But I actually have not experienced that as much as I thought I would.
Just avoid the coffee shops. Like, if you
Yeah,
avoid like
totally.
with the radius of the coffee shops, you kind of
Yeah,
avoid
yeah, for sure.
everyone you know.
Well, yeah, and I think I found a coffee shop that not many people know about
Mm.
quite yet. So I was like, yes, this is where I go. But at the
When we're done, I'm gonna text you my favorite coffee shop that no one knows about,
ooh,
and it's
I'm very
awesome, and it's like it's really great. It's like all gluten free, and like everything, and the women that work there are just like amazing. Anyway,
awesome. I will probably go there today post ride. Um, I Yeah, I think that has been really nice, but I also have the ability to be social when I want to be social, whereas last year, I was pretty isolated and by myself a good 90% of the time, when I wasn't racing. So, um, not only do I have teammates that live here, but there are also so many women in the women's peloton that live here, so many men from the men's peloton that live here, and I have a good friend from Seattle who lives here as well. So I have that, fortunately, have that ability to, be social when I want to be, and have that community. And Girona also, because there are so many cyclists here, has really all of the resources that are necessary. Just getting to the airport, for example, knowing who to go to if you have a bike mechanic need.
Oh, the service course is like right there, I think, for you guys.
Yeah, totally. Um, so yeah, it's been really awesome so far. And I mean, when I moved into my place, I just went into full nesting mode because I hadn't really been able to make a place my own home. So of course I got a massive fluffy IKEA carpet that I like because I like to lay on the floor and was like, oh yeah, this is amazing. I missed having this ability. So yeah, it's been really awesome. And the riding, the first time I came here, I honestly was like, why do people like Girona riding so much? It's terrible. And then I came here last August before the Vuelta, and I did more routes that my teammate had sent me, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, you have to
I
like get
understand.
out of the if you get out of like this circumference of the city, it's just
Yeah,
like endless, the riding.
totally.
It's
Yeah, and
amazing.
like I think the first time I came here, I don't know why. I think I was using Ride with GPS or something and just plotting routes, and I was ended up on the highways and just dirt roads that were not great. And then, Strava has a heat map.
Mm.
So I ended up doing that the second time and also got routes from friends that they recommended. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is much more pleasant.
So if you're nesting in Girona, does that mean you see yourself being in the sport for a while? Do you think that do you have any like long-term goals that you're really excited about?
I mean, I am really excited to tap into the untapped potential that I have. And I've heard from so many people that it takes about 3 to 5 years for a cyclist to really get into their groove in the sport. So next year will be my third year. So I mean, hopefully we'll see how it goes in that way. But I think just, yeah, I want to see where this goes. And of course, the Olympics next year is a goal. And I think just continuing to learn in the bunch and learn the races could benefit my potential result in the future. This last Strada was my first time, and it's just like a Belgian classic in the sense that there are so many key moments that you need to be in the right position at the right time. And now, having been through the race, I know how important those key moments are. Um, and so learning the courses and further developing cohesiveness within the team, I think is just really exciting. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily have long plans. I've signed with EF Education-TIBCO-SVB through 2025. So I'm here until then, at the very least, which is really exciting. And yeah, it's a world that I never expected to be in, and I'm happy to be here.
So you started out your prep for this year. If we like look at this year just in a bubble. You started your prep in Colombia. I want to know with what the story is with that.
Oh man. So I last year was wanting to take advantage of having time off in the off season, and really love traveling. And some of my best experiences with travel in my life has been in Central and South America. And I had mentioned altitude to my director, Tim Harris, one of our directors, and he was like, oh my gosh, Colombia is amazing. And I was like, really? That I've not heard great things about Colombia. And he was like, no, no, no. I have friends there, and it's some of the best writing I've ever done. And I was like, all right, sold. I've been to several countries in South America and have only had good experience. And yeah, booked a flight and made connections when I was there, and they were just so amazing. And I had known that Annemiek had been there a lot and trusted my director to know that it was safe. And honestly, it was some of the best riding I've ever done, while also being and feeling the safest I've ever felt while out on training rides. So yeah, it was really, really a really cool experience.
Awesome. You were there for a while too.
Yeah, just under a month, which yeah, it was very cool.
And did you hang out with Rigo?
I briefly saw him. He had been um doing several Giro de Rigos races in the area. He did in Costa Rica, I think, and then forgot where else he was going. I think he did one in Mexico. And yeah, I think I'd sort of connected with him a little bit about connecting for a ride, but it didn't work out. And then I passed him on a ride and we said hello in person, and I was like, of course, fangirling. And I
Yeah.
was just like, oh my
He's
God, this is
he's
amazing.
really he's like a rock star. He's like the rock star of
Oh yeah.
sailing.
He has this they're called fincas, and it's like a plot of land that people it's hard to explain what it is, but it's just like a plot of land that people can do what they want with it. So like I met someone and stayed with someone in Colombia who had a finca, but it was like a really nice mountainside home that was like their vacation home. But Rigo has a finca that has like a petting zoo and a cafe slash restaurant and a bike shop on it. And like it's in this area called Llano Grande. And you pass it so many times on certain routes, and it's like where everybody goes to get coffee. And I was actually there one time with some people, and I was wearing my EF kit, and I sent Rigo a selfie and was like, hey, I'm at your finca. It was the first time I had been there, and immediately he calls the managers and is like, they don't pay, give them their coffee for free, give them the food for free. And I was like, oh my God. And he sent me home with some coffee, and I was just like, oh, this person is
That's awesome.
yeah.
So you've had a couple races so far this year, but I also wanted to ask you about something that you've talked about on social media, which is kind of the pressure that you're feeling at the moment. I mean, I think that we've talked a bit about how you're new to the sport. You're like fresh on the scene, but you've had some incredible results already, and you're feeling internal pressure to kind of back those up. So how are you feeling now? It's been like a month of the season so far, and you've done some stuff. So are you feeling better about it, or have you found a way to kind of deal with it, or are you still working through it?
I would say I'm still working through it a bit. I know that and feel that the majority of the pressure is coming from myself. I mean, there is pressure from the team to some extent, but they are so good at balancing when there are races that I need to be focused on and feel that pressure, and races that are no expectations. You're still a developing rider. And they've been very vocal with me about knowing and understanding that I still am learning so much, but also have this ability at times to be a race leader. So they're really good at balancing that. On the flip side, I have a lot of expectations for myself, which aren't necessarily always fair. But yeah, I actually spoke a lot with Allison Jackson this last race block about this sort of internal pressure that I'm feeling, and being in the bunch and getting really frustrated with myself when I let fear take over, or do something wrong and just end up in this sort of frustrated mindset, I guess, in the middle of the race. And she was saying, you really need to focus on the small wins. Even if you get your handlebars in front of somebody else in a key moment, you have to celebrate that and be your own cheerleader sort of thing, and just hype yourself up even with those small moments so that you get in the mentality of being positive and focusing on that positivity rather than the negative. So I am really trying to work on that, and I'm very, very thankful to have teammates like AJ who sort of put me or make me focus on being more positive in certain moments. Not being so positive that you're complacent with your effort if it's not what it needs to be, but balancing that with giving yourself grace, I guess, which is something that I definitely need to work on. So it's a balance that I need to find of, finding those positive moments while also maintaining that drive to be the best that I can be. So definitely still working on it.
Does the team have like a sports psych or anything? Because I know a couple teams have sports psychs that work with the riders, and I think it's something that should really be normalized, like especially in our time. To just that, like, all athletes should just have a sports psych that they can turn to, because the mental side of the sport is huge.
Yeah, I think, it's definitely, I think, the largest part of the sport, to be honest. But I work with a sports psychologist. The team does not have one in particular, but they're very supportive of each of us having a sports psych. I think it's really important to find a sports psych that best works for you, because your therapy is very individualized. So I've even spoken with a few teammates about working with a sports psych and saying that I really enjoy mine, and give them their contact info, but also say, it's like you kind of need to shop around for who your therapist / sports psych is, because it is so individualized. And I know I've spoken with so many excuse me, therapists and sports psychs in the past, that are also in the same boat, that they want it to be a good connection to work with you instead of forcing a connection if it's not there.
I mean, it's the same as coaching. Like you want your coach.
Totally.
Yeah, it's like exactly the same. I've always compared coaching to dating, kind of like you can't just be with someone be coached by someone who you think, okay, well, on paper they're really great, and then if it's not working, you need to switch. You can't just like stick with someone if it's not. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Same.
I completely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, cool. I'm glad that you found that, because I think a lot of people, like, I know myself, I had also like a very quick trajectory in my very insignificant career, and I never worked with a sports psych, and it was one of the things that I look back on, I was like, god damn, if only it had been a little bit more normalized in my time, like I might have been able to tackle a couple of the demons that I was fighting internally, and I don't know where I would be. So it's awesome that you're doing that already, because it's just so important.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm so glad that it's become more normalized. And not just in sports. I think it's becoming more normalized in general. And I joke around with one of my good friends back home, but we're like, I'm heterosexual, but I'm like, if there's a guy that's in therapy, I'm super into that, because it means that they're working on their emotions and they're working on their own personal being, and that makes them a better partner. And so it's like, it's a very awesome thing to go to therapy. If it's, I don't know, it's great if people are able to get into therapy and have that support in their court.
Yeah, 100%. Cool. Well, it's been 45 minutes. I've kept you long enough. You should probably get out on your bike. But thank you so much for your time. It's just been incredible getting to know you, and hopefully you won't, feel too much pressure at the Tour de France Femme. We can convince you to do the audio diaries again, because they were just they were peak last year. They were so good.
Great. I love it. I would love to do that. Thank you for having me. And next time you're in Girona, maybe we can go to that coffee place.
Yeah, 100%.